All right, it's Coach John here. Welcome back. And if this is your first time tuning into one of my videos, welcome. It's awesome to have you as a part of the community. Today, I want to talk about how to simplify for success. So, do you ever find yourself saying, I just don't know what to do anymore? You feel kind of overwhelmed because it seems like we're facing so many choices in life. Well, today in this video, I want to show you 6 proven strategies to break through the overwhelm. And my hope is at the end of this video, you're going to feel empowered knowing that doing less equals more success. So let's dive in. So the other day I was at the grocery store. My son was with me. He's 14 months old. He was having a bit of a tough day. Really kind of, anyone who's been a parent knows that kids have tough days. If they have tough days, mom and dad have tough days because it's just kind of, it's kind of taxing mentally. And I was at the grocery store. It's in the afternoon. I'd already had kind of a busy day at work and texted my wife and I was like, well, what kind of cereal do you want? And her reply was, I don't know, you choose. And in that moment, I think I felt myself just feeling really frustrated. You walk into the cereal aisle and it seemed like there was literally hundreds of choices staring at me. And it's like, what do you choose in a situation like this? And I think I just felt really kind of almost overwhelmed by the amount of choice. And ultimately what I ended up doing was grabbing a box of Shreddies. And I don't know if you've heard of, Shreddies, but the whole reason I chose them was because I used to like them as a kid. I think it's been like years since I've ever had them, but I used to like them as a kid. And so what my brain did was just defaulted to, what's the thing that's like the most familiar. And so I wonder if there's ever been a situation where you've experienced something like this, where you're faced with what seems like too many choices, you're feeling a little bit of overwhelm or just indecisionitis. It could be something like looking at a restaurant menu and you're just flipping back and forth between the pages, maybe trying to choose something to watch on Netflix, And so for me, choosing the Shreddies was really just using an old memory in my brain to take a shortcut rather than me kind of having to think about it and make the decision. And so kind of facing something like this, when we just feel kind of overwhelmed with the amount of choice that we're facing, it's usually because we're reaching something called decision fatigue. Did you know that we make more than 35,000 decisions a day, which is like mind-boggling to think about. Thankfully, most of those decisions are fairly automatic where our brain takes shortcuts. But the thing is, the more decisions you make, the more tired your brain becomes. And then a tired brain means making poor choices. So thinking about, some of the decisions that you make, like what clothes I'm going to wear, what food am I going to eat, what path I'm going to take driving to work, peanut butter or jelly, there's just so many almost like unconscious choices that we make every single day. And every one of these choices takes a little bit of time and a little bit of energy. And because we're facing so many choices, the more decisions that we make, the more that our brain is looking for shortcuts. And when we start looking for shortcuts, that's when we start seeing some of the symptoms of decision fatigue starting to set in. So one of them might be procrastination. So just pushing it off till later. I'll make a decision on this later because I don't have the capacity to do it right now. It could be avoidance. So I'm not even going to make the choice at all. It could be something impulsive where you end up just making a poor choice. Or you could find yourself in this place I like to call indecisionitis, where you're just kind of stuck in limbo, going back and forth. And if you're finding yourself in this place of sort of decision fatigue or just feeling a bit overwhelmed, you might notice like you're feeling a little bit more short-tempered, a little bit more frustrated. You're reaching for junk food or fast food more often. But in a space like this, there's good news because we can work with the brain. And that's the question that I always look to answer is how can we work with the brain when we encounter situations like decision fatigue? So here's 6 ways that we can simplify this. And I want you to listen with an open mind, not necessarily choosing or feeling like you have to do all of them, but think, what is one that kind of resonates with me? And of course, you can always come back and watch this later and choose something else. But when you hear something helpful, just jot it down. So number 1 is streamline your choices. So if we make less choices over the course of the day, we tend to make better choices. So an example of this might be making a grocery list before we go to the store. So you have you don't even have to make any more choices, because a grocery store is a classic example of feeling overwhelmed because we are confronted with so much choice. But if you have a list like before you go to the store, that eliminates a lot of decisions and maybe a lot of poor and impulsive decisions that you might make going into that situation. If you struggle with what to wear, you could lay out your clothes the night before. So when you wake up in the morning, when your brain is fresh and you have, all of that brain power, you don't start using decisions, waffling back and forth between, deciding what it is you're going to wear. Driving anywhere, using GPS to navigate. That's kind of another way to do it, where you let the GPS, most times pretty reliable. But what you're doing here is you're removing your need to make decisions, and you're basically streamlining the process so you make a limited number of decisions. And so thinking about this streamlining process, maybe you could reflect on some of the things, some of the routines and habits and behaviors you have over the course of the day, and think, is there something that you could remove to simplify your life? Number 2 would be to delegate decisions. And a perfect example of this was my wife with her cereal choice. When I texted her and said, well, what kind of cereal did you want me to get? And she said, you decide. That was exactly what was happening there. And, I think, do you ever delegate decisions? It could be things like, hey, let's let the kids pick a movie. Let's let my partner or my friend choose the restaurant, And it's not that you want to do this all of the time, but if there's opportunities to do this where you pass some of the decision-making off to somebody else, that's just one less choice that you have to make or go back and forth within your head. Because sometimes even making a choice, is like making 4 or 5 decisions as you go kind of back and forth. So number 3 would be make big decisions in the morning. So our brain is hopefully more rested and fresh in the morning than it's going to be at the end of the day. Typically, we have a little bit higher cortisol levels in the morning, meaning we're more focused and we're more alert. We tend to be a little bit more thoughtful. Maybe we're not quite as stressed and overwhelmed because the day hasn't necessarily started. Whereas later in the day, when we've maybe gone through the stresses of the day, we're going to find ourselves in a more sort of impulsive place. And that means we're probably making more poor decisions with less conscious thought going into it, more defaulting back to old familiar or convenient patterns. That's our brain looking for those shortcuts again. Ultimately, when it comes to making decisions around food, it's best not to make those choices if you have the option to not make those choices when you're tired or hungry. Because again, that's when things are a little bit more difficult and we tend to make the poor choices. The more tired we are, the more we're just looking for something to make us feel comfortable in the moment and something that feels like the least amount of effort. So number 4 would be to trust yourself. So I wonder if you've ever struggled with second guessing. You make a choice, but this is one of those interesting things. It's called the paradox of choice. And that is, the more choices that we are confronted with, the more that we struggle with making a decision and the more likely we are to encounter second guessing. So let's say if you have 2 choices and you make a choice, well, you have a 50% choice of getting it right or wrong. If you have 100 choices, you have like 1 chance of getting it right and 99 chances of getting it wrong. And so there's a lot more opportunity to maybe second guess and worry about the decision that you make. And really, that's kind of like using up some of these decisions unnecessarily as you kind of second guess and, well, maybe I'm going to do this, or maybe I'm going to do that. And some of this comes from maybe this fear or this need for perfectionism. I have to make the right decision, and something terrible is going to happen if I make the wrong decision. But if you could just make peace with the fact that you're going to make the best choice with what you know in the moment. So once you've made that choice, just stick with that choice and commit to that choice. So really, we're saying kind of, trust your gut in a situation like this. Number 5 would be to develop daily routines. So when our brain is kind of like a habit-forming computer. So when we repeat a behavior, the more times we repeat that behavior, the less conscious thought it requires. And so if there's a way that we can kind of develop a routine, that, again, what we're trying to do is remove the amount of choice or remove or limit or reduce the number of decisions that we're making in a day. And so it could be something like setting an alarm so you have a consistent wake-up time every day. And in an ideal scenario, I understand in real world it may not play out like this, but in an ideal scenario, you'd actually wake up very close to the same time 7 days a week, because our body actually really responds quite well to having a rhythm. And in fact, there is such a thing called social jet lag, and that is where, on the weekends, our sleep routine shifts by more than 3 hours. So we end up staying later at night because it's a weekend and so on. So the more consistent we can be there, the more we can kind of streamline. Another example might be putting activity on your schedule. So literally just saying, this is the block of time that I will use for being active. Again, it sort of takes away the choice, should I do it this time, that time, and so on. Just put it on your schedule and make it an appointment that you can't miss. And once it's there, now you don't have to make a choice around that. If you struggle with deciding what to wear, you just could have a few kind of go-to outfits. So for me, I have a whole bunch of different golf shirts, similar to the one that I'm wearing now, and different colors. So that's usually, but I'm most likely going to wear a golf shirt. That's the thing I like to do. And I'm a jeans guy. So, and most of the time I'm filming videos like this where you're only seeing the top anyways. So having some go-to outfits, again, just really takes away that need to think too much about that. So maybe have 5 or 6 kind of go-to outfits you can use at any time. So the beautiful thing about habits is habits conserve mental energy. So over 98% of our brain function, or I should say up to 98% of our brain function is automatic or unconscious. So anytime that we don't have to use conscious thought around the decision making, we can make things a little bit simpler for ourselves. So habits are a great way to try to conserve that mental energy. And the final thing I'd like to mention is really seek help if you need it. So if you are struggling with a sense of overwhelm, feeling stressed, starting to feel burnt out, just that it's starting to creep in, like you're just not sure, maybe what to do and how you're going to get through this, there is no shame in seeking help. If you're genuinely struggling, look for a way that you can get some help. And I would say look for if there are some resources in your community, because there's almost always going to be some kind of resource available. Now it could start with a trusted friend. It could look at are there any sort of local counseling services offered, are there any sort of community funded resources like that if you find yourself in a difficult situation financially. But it's getting over this idea that somehow the asking for help is represents like a flaw or it's a bad thing. Asking for help is one of the best things that we can do for ourselves. And in that way, we're actually, again, maybe lifting some of the emotional and cognitive or mental burden that we're struggling with. And so I really, I just want to encourage you, don't suffer in silence or struggle alone. So don't be ashamed to ask for help. So just thinking about the different things that we touched on here, I'm curious what you found the most helpful. So number one was Streamline choices. So that's kind of like making that grocery list. So when you get to the grocery store, you're not waffling and making a whole bunch of decisions trying to decide on something because you already have a set list. Number two was like delegate decisions. For example, let your kids pick a movie if you're going to have a family movie night. Number three was to make big decisions in the morning. That's when our brain is the most fresh and we're most likely to make good decisions. Number four is to trust yourself or to stop second guessing. So once you make a choice, just trust that you made the best choice that you could in that moment with what you knew. Number five is develop daily routines. So developing habits equals using less brain power, so we have more of it kind of freed up for the things that we enjoy. And number six is seek help if needed. So just there's no shame in recognizing, hey, I need a little bit of help here. And, human beings, we thrive with connection and social connection. So don't ever be ashamed to seek for help. So for me, I very often use lists. That's my way of doing it. I have to-do lists for all the different things that I do. For me, that just, because I run a couple of different businesses as well as I run some podcasts. And so I've got a lot of things. And of course, I have a family, a wife, a kid. I got a lot of different things on the go, a lot of demands on my time. And if I didn't put things down on paper, I think I would find myself really, really struggling with a lot of this overwhelm. But putting it on paper and making lists for me just really helps me to clarify what's the most important thing for me to do in that moment. And it reduces the number of decisions I have to make. And so thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope that you are feeling inspired or encouraged as you see that you can do less and be more successful. So I really want to encourage you to look for ways that you can in your life simplify for success.